Hey folks, John Oliver here, ready to dive into a topic slicker than a greased weasel: global oil politics. Now I know what you're thinking. John, that sounds as exciting as watching paint dry on a Tuesday. But trust me, this stuff is more dramatic than a Real Housewives reunion. We're talking power struggles, shadowy deals, and enough plot twists to make M. Night Shyamalan jealous. Oil. The black blood pumping through the veins of our modern world. It fuels our cars, heats our homes, and even finds its way into our cosmetics. It's the lifeblood of global economies. And everyone wants a piece of the action. So, buckle up, buttercups, because we're about to embark on a wild ride through the history of oil, where we'll expose the hidden forces, the shady shenanigans, and the downright ridiculousness that have shaped our world. Our story begins in the early 20th century with the rise of the oil giants, those corporate titans who struck liquid gold and held the world hostage with their oily grip. These guys were the original too big to fail, and they played the game hard. We're talking backroom deals, political puppet masters, and enough mustache-twirling villainy to make Snidely Whiplash blush. The Middle East, sitting on a sea of black gold, decided it was time to cash in. Enter OPEC, the cartel that made big oil look like a bunch of amateurs. They flexed their muscles, choked the oil supply, and sent shockwaves through the global economy. The world learned the hard way: never underestimate the power of a good old-fashioned oil embargo. Let's rewind to the early 20th century. Handlebar mustaches, top hats, and oil galore. The Seven Sisters oil giants controlling everything. Standard Oil, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, Mobil, Texaco, Gulf Oil, and Chevron. They controlled supply, prices, and politics, bribing politicians, funding coups, and starting wars for black gold. Now, you can't talk about the oil giants without mentioning the men behind the mustaches, the oil tycoons who built these empires from the ground up. We're talking legends like John D. Rockefeller, the OG oil baron who founded Standard Oil and became America's first billionaire. Then there was Marcus Samuel, the founder of Shell, who was basically the British version of Rockefeller. He started out selling seashells by the seashore, no, seriously, and ended up building an oil empire that spanned the globe. And let's not forget Henri de Terting, the Dutch businessman who turned Royal Dutch Shell into a global powerhouse. These guys were the rock stars of their day. But instead of guitars and groupies, they had oil wells and political influence. They were the original one percenters, and they lived like kings. Private jets? Check. Mansions in every time zone? Check. Playing Monopoly with nations, the oil baron's game of risk. But here's the thing about having all that power: it tends to go to your head. The oil giants weren't content with just controlling the oil industry. They wanted to control the world. They used their wealth and influence to topple governments, rig elections, and generally throw their weight around like a bunch of toddlers in a tiara shop. They meddled in the Middle East, they played puppet master in Latin America, and they even had their greasy fingers in the pie of World War II. Now, I'm not saying they were solely responsible for all the world's problems. That would be giving them too much credit. But let's just say they weren't exactly a force for peace and harmony. The winds of change were blowing, and a new player was about to enter the game, one that would shake the oil industry to its core. You see, while the oil barons were busy playing their games of global domination, a storm was brewing in the desert. The Middle East, sitting on a treasure trove of oil, had finally had enough of being treated like a bunch of chumps. They realized that they had something the Western world desperately needed, something far more valuable than any weapon or political alliance. Thus, a new era in global oil politics was about to dawn, one where the Seven Sisters would learn that their days of absolute power were numbered. All right, folks, let's fast forward to the swinging 60s. The Beatles were topping the charts, bell-bottoms were all the rage, and the Middle East was about to drop the biggest geopolitical mic drop in history. Enter OPEC, the organization of the petroleum exporting countries. This wasn't just another acronym in a world already drowning in acronyms. This was a cartel, a league of extraordinary oil-producing nations united by a common goal to take back control of their black gold and stick it to the man. Their motto, we've got the oil, and you've got the thirst. Now, OPEC wasn't messing around. They knew that united, they stood. Divided, they'd continue to be ripped off like tourists in a Times Square souvenir shop. They agreed to coordinate their oil production, setting limits on how much crude they'd pump out, thus controlling the global supply. Suddenly, the Seven Sisters weren't the only kids on the geopolitical playground. OPEC was the new bully in town, and they weren't afraid to throw their weight around. The oil giants, used to getting their own way, were not best pleased. In fact, they were just getting started. Picture this. It's 1973. The Bee Gees are dominating the airwaves, disco fever is sweeping the nation, and the world is on the brink of an energy crisis of epic proportions. OPEC announced an oil embargo against the United States and other countries that supported Israel in the Yom Kippur War. Basically, they shut off the oil tap, leaving the West high and dry, literally. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. People were fighting over gasoline like it was the last slice of pizza at a Weight Watchers meeting. The 1973 oil embargo was a wake-up call for the world, a stark reminder that oil wasn't just some commodity, it was a weapon, a tool of political power, and OPEC held the keys to the arsenal. The Seven Sisters, once untouchable titans of industry, were humbled. The balance of power had shifted, and the world would never be the same. The era of cheap, plentiful oil was over. The world had to adapt, to find new sources of energy, to reduce its dependence on this volatile region. The Middle East's oil weapon, more powerful than a Jedi mind trick. Okay, so we've established that OPEC knows how to throw an oil party, and that the Seven Sisters aren't invited. But let's zoom in on the Middle East, a region that makes a Kardashian wedding look low-key. This, my friends, is where the oil is. We're talking Saudi Arabia, swimming in a sea of black gold like Scrooge McDuck in his money bin. We're talking Iraq, Kuwait, Iran, countries with enough oil reserves to make your head spin faster than a drill bit. The Middle East quickly realized that oil wasn't just a commodity, it was a weapon, a bargaining chip. Now let's talk about Iran, a country that's been making headlines longer than most influencers have been alive. Iran, you see, is like that kid in class who always sits in the back, wearing sunglasses indoors and refusing to follow the rules. They've always marched to the beat of their own oil drum, and they've got a history with the West that's more complicated than a Rubik's Cube designed by M.C. Escher. Remember the 1953 Iranian coup d'etat? Yeah, that was fun. The US and the UK worried that Iran's democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, was getting a little too cozy with the Soviets and might, gasp, nationalize their precious oil industry, decided to orchestrate a coup. They ousted Mossadegh, installed the Shah, basically a king, in his place, and patted themselves on the back for a job well done. So the Shah's in charge. Things seem hunky-dory, right? Wrong again. The Shah, while chummy with the West, wasn't exactly beloved by his own people. He was seen as a puppet of foreign powers, more interested in sipping champagne with Western oil executives than addressing the needs of his own people. Enter Ayatollah Khomeini, a charismatic religious leader who'd been exiled by the Shah. Khomeini was not a fan of the West, to put it mildly. Fast forward to 1979, and the Iranian Revolution explodes. The Shah flees the country. Khomeini returns to a hero's welcome, and Iran transforms into an Islamic republic, sending shockwaves through the world and the oil markets. Khomeini knew the power of oil. He wasn't afraid to use it as leverage, to play hardball with the West, to disrupt the global oil supply just to prove a point. Section 4, Oil and Intrigue, a Persian Gulf Mystery. Now, the Persian Gulf region is a bit like a soap opera, with more plot twists than an episode of Days of Our Lives. You've got rivalries, alliances, betrayals, and enough backstabbing to make a Shakespearean tragedy look like a tea party. And at the heart of it all, oil. The lifeblood of the global economy, flowing through pipelines and shipping lanes, fueling economies and igniting conflicts. The Persian Gulf region, my friends, is a reminder that oil is more than just a commodity. It's a source of power, a catalyst for conflict, and a key to understanding the complex geopolitical chess game that continues to shape our world. Section 1. The Yanks strike back fracking awesome. Alright folks, remember how OPEC was riding high, throwing their oil weight around like a toddler with a sippy cup full of crude? Well, the Yanks were about to crash that party harder than a bald eagle at a teacup pig convention. Enter the U.S. shale revolution, a game changer that would shake the global energy market like a snow globe full of black gold. You see, deep beneath the good old U.S. of A., trapped in layers of shale rock, lay vast reserves of oil and natural gas, just waiting to be unleashed. Now, getting to this unconventional oil wasn't easy. It required a controversial technique called hydraulic fracturing, or fracking for short. Think of it as giving Mother Earth a very intense spa treatment involving high-pressure water injections and a whole lot of sand. Environmentalists weren't thrilled, but hey, when has that ever stopped progress? Don't answer that. The point is, fracking worked, and it worked like a charm. Section 2. Shale boom, baby, America's energy renaissance, or midlife crisis. The U.S., once heavily reliant on oil imports, mainly from those OPEC frenemies, suddenly found itself swimming in a sea of domestic crude. It was like that moment in a montage scene when the underdog trains hard and emerges as a lean, mean, oil-producing machine. Oil production soared. Prices plummeted. The U.S. became the world's largest oil producer, surpassing even those desert dwellers with their seemingly endless reserves. It was the American dream, fueled by fracking fluid and a healthy dose of "we'll show 'em" spirit. Now, OPEC wasn't exactly thrilled with this turn of events. They'd gotten used to being the big dog on the oil block, dictating prices and throwing their weight around like a sumo wrestler at a buffet. Suddenly, their grip on the global oil market was slipping faster than a greased pig at a county fair. The U.S., their biggest customer, was now their biggest competitor. Awkward. They tried to fight back, flooding the market with cheap oil to drive down prices and squeeze out those upstart shale producers. But the Yanks, they were scrappy. They'd tasted energy independence, and they weren't about to give it up without a fight. The shale revolution wasn't just a big deal for the U.S. It was a seismic shift in the global energy landscape. It changed the rules of the game, rewrote the geopolitical playbook, and left everyone scrambling to adjust. Oil prices stabilized, which was good news for consumers, but not so much for those OPEC nations reliant on high oil prices to fund their lavish lifestyles. Looking at you, Saudi princes and your pet tigers. The U.S., newly empowered as an energy powerhouse, flexed its diplomatic muscles. They could now afford to play hardball with those countries that had previously held them hostage with their oil reserves. The shale revolution, my friends, was a game changer. It showed the world that the U.S. wasn't just a consumer of oil, but a force to be reckoned with in the global energy market. But as with all things in the world of oil, the story doesn't end there. All right, folks, buckle up because things are about to get messier than a toddler's face after a spaghetti and meatball dinner. It's 1990, MC Hammer's Can't Touch. This is topping the charts, shoulder pads are still inexplicably a thing, and the world is on the brink of war in the Persian Gulf. Remember Saddam Hussein, the dictator of Iraq with a penchant for military jackets and a severe lack of chill? Well, he decided to invade Kuwait, a tiny oil-rich nation that apparently looked like an easy target. Big mistake, buddy. See, Kuwait was like the popular kid in school, everyone's favorite oil supplier, and nobody messes with the popular kid, especially not when their best friend happens to be the US of A. So the US, along with a coalition of allies, launched Operation Desert Storm, a military campaign that would make even Rambo say, "Whoa, guys, maybe we should try diplomacy first." Section 2, Operation Iraqi Freedom, mission accomplished. Spoiler alert, not really. Fast forward to 2003, and the world is treated to a sequel nobody asked for, Operation Iraqi Freedom. This time, the US, led by President George W. Bush and his trusty sidekick Dick Cheney, who coincidentally used to be the CEO of an oil company, decided to invade Iraq again. Their reasons? Well, they claimed Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction. Spoiler alert, they didn't. And that Saddam Hussein was in cahoots with Al-Qaeda, another swing and a miss. But let's be real, folks, it was all about the oil. Iraq, you see, was sitting on a sea of black gold, and the US, still traumatized by those OPEC-induced gas lines of the 70s, wanted to make sure that sweet, sweet crude was flowing their way. The invasion was a mess, a quagmire of epic proportions that cost trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, and destabilized the entire region. Mission accomplished? Not so much. Section 3. The Green Giant awakens. Alternative energy enters the ring. Amidst oil-fueled chaos, a glimmer of hope emerged. Like a solar-powered beacon, the world started investing in alternative energy. Solar, wind, hydro, geothermal. These green energy sources were becoming viable. The world was starting to take notice. The oil industry is still a behemoth, but the tide is turning, folks. The future is green. Or at least it better be. The future of oil. A crystal ball full of crude. What does the future hold for oil? My crystal ball is cloudy from emissions. It's going to be a wild ride. Demand is there, but supply is diverse. US shale revolution, OPEC's loosening grip, and new players are emerging. Climate change forces policy shifts, investing in cleaner alternatives. Transition is necessary to avoid catastrophe. The future of oil is uncertain. Aim for a sustainable future beyond black gold. So, there you have it, folks. The wild, wacky world of global oil politics. From mustachioed oil barons to OPEC and sweet crude-loving sheikhs, the US shale revolution shook things up, and the world slowly embraced alternative energy. It's been a ride, hasn't it? Like a roller coaster designed by oil executives, fueled by a substance destroying the planet. But where do we go from here? What's the end game for this oil-soaked saga? If I had all the answers, I wouldn't be here with you lovely people. I'd be lounging on a private island, sipping margaritas out of a giant conch shell, probably owned by an oil tycoon. The future of oil is as unpredictable as a toddler on a sugar rush. Too many variables, too many players, too many geopolitical wildcards to make any accurate predictions. But here's what we do know. Oil ain't going anywhere anytime soon. We're still hooked on this black gold, like a bunch of caffeine-addicted squirrels hopped up on espresso beans. The transition to alternative energy is happening, but it's slow, expensive, and often hampered by political inertia and those pesky fossil fuel lobbyists with their deep pockets and even deeper tans. So, what can we, the average Joes and Janes of the world, do about all this? Well, for starters, stay informed. Don't just accept those slick oil company commercials or those political speeches that sound like they were written by a lobbyist on a private jet. Ask questions. Demand transparency. Support policies that promote renewable energy and hold those polluters accountable. And for the love of all that is holy, stop buying gas-guzzling SUVs like they're going out of style. Spoiler alert, they should be. Look, I know it can feel overwhelming. The oil industry is a behemoth, a global octopus with tentacles in every corner of the world. But remember, even octopuses have weaknesses. They're highly intelligent, for one thing, which means they can probably sense our growing frustration and desire for change. We have power, folks. We have our voices, our votes, and most importantly, our wallets. Every time we choose a fuel-efficient car, invest in solar panels, or support a company committed to sustainability, we're sending a message. We're telling those oil executives and their political puppets that we're tired of their game, and we're ready to play by a different set of rules. It's not going to be easy, and it won't happen overnight. But remember, even the most complex, oil-soaked machine can be brought to a grinding halt if enough people decide they don't want to play anymore. That's the beauty of democracy, folks. It's messy, it's chaotic, and it often feels like we're banging our heads against a wall of oil barrels. But it's the best system we've got, and it's up to us to make it work. So, stay informed, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay hopeful. The future of our planet depends on it. And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this whole oil-soaked era and wonder what all the fuss was about. Until then, stay slippery, my friends, and watch out for those oil spills.